such a genuine gem. Thank you for clicking on my video. I'm Brooke McKenna, but today's case is a solved case of the social media murder of Kayleigh Haywood. We are all aware that the outside world can be dangerous. However, do we realize that the inside of our phones can be just as detrimental to our safety when we're communicating online? This case is a cautionary tale for many, and poor Kayleigh was taken before she could learn this lesson. By the way, I post so much content like this. It is my absolute passion to tell these stories, and I mean no harm or disrespect when I do so. So if it's something you would like to support me in doing, all you have to do is make sure you are subscribed with the post notification bell on, giving this video a thumbs up, and leaving a nice comment down below. I also want to thank today's sponsor, which is Magellan TV. Now, Magellan TV is actually a documentary streaming service run by actual filmmakers. There are no ads, and it can be watched on TV, laptop, or phone. There are so many amazing topics to learn about on there. I mean, you can do history, space, science, and best of all, true crime. I found that a lot of the true crime documentaries were done on lesser known cases, and that's what I really loved about it is, you know, being able to find out about victims that we couldn't have known about before. In fact, that is how I found out about the case that I'm presenting to you today. You see, Magellan TV actually has a series called Deadly Dates, which has 9 episodes of dates that went horribly wrong. What I truly love about this series is that it seems to be very victim and family focused rather than, you know, sensationalizing the murder or the killer or anything like that. It's really victim focused, but you guys know that I really make a priority on my channel, so it was nice to be able to watch a documentary that was like that as well, because oftentimes they are not. Each of these episodes presented a different victim and family, and one of them was Kayleigh herself. But there are so many other types of documentaries, different cases to look at, and I really recommend it if you like to learn about different things about our world, about things that go on in a way that is kind of like one of these videos, a little documentary. So if Magellan TV sounds like something you guys want to check out, I really recommend it. There will be a link down below that gives you a 1-month free trial. You get access to so many documentaries with that, so you might as well try it out for 1 month for free, and then if you love it, you can continue on from there. So again, if you want to try it out, just click the link in the description, and that really does help support this channel as well. I don't get any commission on that at all. It's just a link that tells them that you guys wanted to go and look at their documentaries because of me. So yeah, thank you Magellan TV for sponsoring this portion of the video. Now let's get back to the story. So it was 2015 in England, and the Haywood family lived in a place called Measham, Leicestershire. Now this was a tiny rural location, and the Haywood family consisted of the mother Stephanie, the father Martin, and their 7 kids, one of which was 15-year-old Kayleigh, who was born in August of 2000. Now she was actually the second youngest. Kayleigh loved her family so deeply. I mean, she was best friends with her mother, and that's quite unique for a teenager to be able to say that. You know, often when you grow up, you can be friends with your family and your parents, but as a teenager, you often bicker with them. But her and her mother were more like friends than mother and daughter. And her siblings were also a huge part of her life. She was closest with her youngest sibling, who was her sister, and everyone fought like normal. They were a really normal, good, loving family, but they loved each other so deeply. Being so young, Kayleigh really did have a good head on her shoulders. She had a bubbly personality, and she did what she wanted. She knew what she wanted, and she wasn't afraid to speak up for what she believed in. Now, she was a freshman in high school, and she had some friends. She didn't have a huge friend group, but the friends that she did have were really important to her. But the problem was that they actually all lived quite far away from Kayleigh. So to communicate with them, she would have to do this online. Because she wanted to tell everything to these friends, immediately after getting home from school, she would run upstairs and get on her phone to immerse herself in this online world for hours. You see, they didn't really text that much. Facebook was their favorite place to be. They had group chats, the possibility of making new friends, and they just knew that this whole community was, this new thing that they could be involved in rather than just texting back and forth. Kayleigh was one to think forward to the future. She already had planned out what she wanted to do with her career. She wanted to be a hairdresser. Now, although she seemed quite mature, Kayleigh was still a 15-year-old child whose brain had not fully developed and who wouldn't be able to see the manipulation and the new reality of a situation that she was going to be thrown into. You see, on Friday, November 13th, Kayleigh would ask her parents if she could stay with a friend. This wasn't unusual because, like I told you, they lived quite far away, so it made sense for her to spend the night somewhere rather than just visiting and having to make the trip all the way back that same day. So both their parents said that was completely fine, and Kayleigh's mother actually gave her a 10-pound note and joked not to spend it all in one place, and she kind of laughed and kissed her mother on the cheek, said goodbye, and her father took her to drop her off. He wasn't going to drop her off at the friend's house, though. He actually would, at 5:30 p.m., drop her off at a local swimming pool. This is where the friend was supposedly doing swimming lessons, and so the dad dropped her off in the parking lot there. This was in the neighboring town of Ipstock, and this was around 6 miles from her home. However, she would never return home. Not that day, not in a few days. Kayleigh would actually contact them again the next day, so that Saturday, asking if she could spend another night with her friend. Her parents agreed. She was extremely happy with this, and her parents felt comfortable because Kayleigh had stayed with this friend before. Nothing went wrong, and Ipstock, where this friend was supposed to live, was a really nice town with very low crime rates, and so they felt extremely comfortable with their daughter staying there. So it wasn't unusual that the next morning they still hadn't heard from Kayleigh. They just thought she had slept in, and they would hear from her for when she wanted to be picked up when she woke up. But at the same time that her parents were thinking this, her phone was actually being found smashed in the middle of the road by a random citizen who would pick up this phone and decide to call the first number they could find. Now, this was when Kayleigh's parents would get a call, not from this person that found the phone, but from Kayleigh's friend. Now, Kayleigh's friend would tell them what had gone on and that they had gotten a call from this random person who had Kayleigh's phone and had found it smashed in the middle of the road, and they were calling them to make sure Kayleigh was okay. And at the same time, Kayleigh's parents were saying, "What do you mean you're asking if Kayleigh's okay? Kayleigh said she was staying with you." At this point, the friend told them that she was never staying with her, that she actually hadn't seen her since that last day of school. This friend was telling them every parent's nightmare, that they had dropped their daughter off to stay the night with a friend that they never met. She hadn't met this friend at the swimming pool that day, but she did meet someone her parents didn't know. The police were immediately called after this, and the search for Kayleigh began. The problem was no one knew where she had gone that day. She had told everybody she was staying with this friend, and she told this friend that she was staying with her aunt. So if both of those were lies, what was the truth? At this point, investigators tried to go through Kayleigh's phone, now that they thankfully had her phone, and thought that they could probably track her from certain messages. So they started going through her text, and they found that Friday night she was taking selfies, she was sending them to friends, she seemed very happy, and none of these photos showed where she was, so they couldn't trace her from the photos, but she was very smiley, and this would lead to a dead end ultimately. However, then investigators started to scour her social media profiles, knowing that she was a teenager and this was such a huge craze at the time and has only gotten, even bigger from there. But Facebook was one of the main social media sites, after MySpace, of course, that blossomed into what we now have today. Kayleigh was extremely active on her Facebook. She was posting constantly, whether it was, pictures, whether it was messages, whether it was statuses. She loved her Facebook, and she didn't go more than, a few hours, if even that, without posting. So this was a teenager's huge pastime. They knew that. So they decided to see when the last time she posted was. And it was found that the last time she was said to be online was around 9 p.m. that Saturday. And after that, nothing had been posted. This was completely unlike Kayleigh to just stop posting. Volunteers, family, and 500 investigators were still searching the area on foot, in helicopters in the air, hoping to find something that would give them a clue as to where Kayleigh went. That is when they found a bra in Ipstock, where she was said to, be staying with his friend. They found this bra in a parking lot. Well, it was the parking lot of a park behind a fence. And her body was not there. However, her mother did confirm that it was her bra. 5 days later, with her parents waiting in fear to hear any sort of news they could about where their daughter had gone, her body would be found. It was November 18th, and the search team was canvassing the nearby lake when they came across her body in the undergrowth. The family was absolutely devastated, of course, and a vigil was actually set up to honor Kayleigh with hundreds of people in attendance. They released purple balloons because that was Kayleigh's favorite color, and there were purple, little bows all over the community, and everybody was mourning this loss. No one could believe that this small community of Ipstock just had a murder occur. But investigators already had a suspect in mind, and they had already talked to this man. They were now going to be interrogating him for murder. You see, if we backtrack a little bit, when the investigators were going through Kayleigh's phone on her social media, they found that 2 weeks prior to her disappearance, on October 31st, she had gotten a message. Now, this was from a man whose username was Luke Fun Times Harlow, and he had sent her a seemingly innocent message saying, "Hi, how are you?" Kayleigh responded asking who it was, who he was, and she didn't recognize his picture or his name, and he went on to tell her that he was basically a friend of a friend. So they had mutual friends, and of course that's how he came across her profile on Facebook and thought she was beautiful, so he added her. This 15-year-old girl, who hadn't really heard that she was beautiful, especially by a man before, was completely intrigued, and they began to constantly talk. Luke was showering Kayleigh with these compliments, and Kayleigh wouldn't believe him. She would always say things like, "Oh, I'm not that pretty." Being a teenager, she wasn't the most confident in herself. She wasn't the most secure, and so these compliments really did mean everything to her. And so he would continue to tell her how beautiful she was, that he couldn't believe she didn't have a boyfriend. And he would also always side with her, no matter what she was talking about. If she said she got in an argument with her parents, with a sibling, with a friend, he would always say that she was right and that they had no, right to argue with her. And so to her, he really did feel like her knight in shining armor. She could tell him anything, and he would have nothing but good things to say back to her. It was Luke to the rescue in her eyes. But then he asked her how old she was, and Kayleigh would tell him she was 19. At this point, he then told her he was 26. And of course, if Kayleigh was 19, this would be legal. But she wasn't. However, this would not go on long with Kayleigh's secret staying a secret. In fact, a few days later, Luke actually saw a picture of Kayleigh on her profile in her school uniform and basically asked her how old she was, really. And that is when Kayleigh told him the truth. She was only 15 years old. However, the conversation didn't stop. In fact, he began saying things like, "I really like you. I just keep worrying about the age range because I could get into trouble." He would also say, "I am too old for you and I will get into trouble for seeing you." When Kayleigh continued to want to talk to him regardless of this and beg him to talk to her because she was 15 years old and loved the compliments, he would say, "Let's just keep it a secret." And the thrill of this secret relationship, like in the movies, made Kayleigh want to keep coming back. Because this was normal to her. The only relationship she had ever seen was on screen. She had never been in a real relationship. So all of those movies that show these, taboo, toxic relationships as good relationships made her believe that this was okay. That this toxic man, this predator, was the bad boy on these movies that everybody wants, and he wanted her. They would constantly talk about their age difference. It wasn't like they both put it out of their mind and tried to forget about it. Luke wanted to keep talking about it, and he would say things like, "I don't want you to think that I'm a creep. Would you be my girlfriend if I was younger?" And again would keep telling her to be quiet by saying, "Don't go around telling people about this or they will think it's weird." Kayleigh agreed that she wouldn't tell anybody and even told Luke that she was telling everybody she was taken, that they were in a relationship. The conversation then began to get sexual, and Luke was telling her what he wanted to do to her in bed, that he wanted to be friends with benefits, and that he wanted to have a sexual relationship with her. However, Kayleigh told him straight away, because like I told you, she was very firm in what she believed in, and she told him straight away she didn't want to have sex yet, she wasn't ready for that. And when Luke continued to talk about it, Kayleigh finally said that she would have to probably be drunk first. That's when Luke began to plan for her to come over, saying that he would buy her whatever alcohol she liked. They would eat chocolate and watch movies at his place. And obviously, this showed his predatory behavior on so many levels. And when investigators began to read through these thousands of messages, they thought the same thing, and they traced him to his place. And Luke Harlow was at his home when they barged in and demanded to question him. Luke then admitted that he was with Kayleigh that Friday and that Saturday night, but he had no idea what happened to her after that. Investigators wanted to hear everything about this relationship with Kayleigh through Luke's perspective to see what he would admit and what he wouldn't. And Luke was fidgety when he was talking. He was using very exaggerated emotions to explain his story and gestures. And he actually said he wasn't sure who had friended who first, but it was random, and he had a ton of friends that he didn't know and that he just added everybody. And he said it was a simple conversation and he knew she was 15. Yet officers knew what was really said. However, even if they didn't know what was really said, investigators immediately saw how animated he was when he was talking. Like he was trying to, audition for a movie. Like he was trying to be this A-list actor to make people believe he was telling the truth. They also had found a message from Luke to Kayleigh on the day that she was supposedly going to a friend's house, saying, "I will go to the shop on Friday to get some alcohol. It helps if you're a bit drunk when you meet somebody for the first time." It was found that when Kayleigh was dropped off that day, she didn't meet anyone at the swimming pool, but she did walk to the town center to meet Luke in public before getting in his vehicle and going to his apartment with him. But they wouldn't be alone, and that's something that we'll get into here in a little bit. But when investigators finally showed up at Luke's home to question him, Luke had also immediately given them Kayleigh's belongings, the rest of her belongings that were at his home. And he frantically then asked where her phone was, if they had gone through her phone. And investigators now believed, after talking to him, that he had asked this because he wanted to erase the messages between the two of them, because they had also confiscated Luke's phone, and he had around 500 messages between the two. However, on Kayleigh's phone, there was 2,643 messages. So what were those thousands of messages that he erased? Thankfully, they had Kayleigh's to show what they said, and they were not good. Kayleigh had been brought in for an autopsy at this time, and it was found that her cause of death was bludgeoning to the head and facial injuries as well, and she had also been sexually assaulted. She had been beaten so badly that they had to use dental records to identify her. Witnesses then came forward from Ipstock saying that that Saturday night, they heard screams and they heard banging coming from the apartment complex where Luke stayed. In fact, people all around Ipstock said that they heard a girl screaming and like she was running through the town from around 10:30 p.m. to 3:30 a.m. Finally, another witness came forward to claim that he believed he saw something. Now, he said that he looked out his window when he heard screams and he saw a man tackle a girl, and he believed that it was an officer taking someone down. However, then he realized it wasn't an officer but a boy and a girl, and it looked like they had an argument and it had turned physical. However, after a little while, they both stood up, walked hand in hand away into the dark, and so the man thought that it was over. Investigators were still going through these thousands of messages, trying to piece together, a case against Luke, and that is when they found one of the most concerning messages of all, and this was the fact that Luke had said, "Can I kidnap you forever?" He was also the one to tell her to lie to her parents about where she was going that night, where she was spending the night. However, what I didn't tell you is that Luke told investigators something that they didn't expect, and that was that someone else was involved. You see, Luke had a neighbor named Stephen Beedman, and he was 28 years old and an old friend of Luke's from high school. He also lived right next door to him. Luke had said that Saturday he had gone to Stephen's place to see if he could get some mixers for himself and Kayleigh because they had drank all of them and they wanted to continue drinking alcohol. So he went over there to see if he could get some Coke or some lemonade because they were all out. He told them they had been drinking all night and all day and they needed some more. And Luke said that Stephen then told him he didn't have any, but he asked why he needed it. And when Luke told him, he decided to go to the apartment with Luke. Luke had apparently told Stephen that he had a bird around, and from what I've gathered, this is kind of a term used for women that you want to get with. It's not like a nice term. It's a term to like demean a woman or a girl, because Kayleigh was a little girl. And so Stephen was allegedly with Luke and Kayleigh that night. Luke said that he went to bed early and the two of them actually were alone and went out for a while. Investigators couldn't bring Stephen in immediately because he was actually not at his home, and so they had to locate him first. But when they did, with one look, they were concerned, extremely concerned. Stephen said that he was with the two of them that night, but they were so drunk after drinking for hours and hours that he was there for around 4 hours when Luke and Kayleigh were, falling asleep and falling over and not being able to talk to him, so he decided to leave because it was boring. He said he didn't know where Kayleigh was, and he wasn't the last person to see her. At this point, when they had brought Stephen in for questioning, they hadn't yet found Kayleigh, but they did know that something horrific had happened, because he had injuries all over his face. There was one on his forehead, his nose, his chin, and it looked as though he had been beaten up badly, like there had been a fight, and they were fresh. At this point, no one knew where Kayleigh was, so in order to find her, they were going to have to ask these men enough questions to make them crack, because they were not coming out with anything. Investigators didn't know whether Stephen or Luke had murdered Kayleigh, had kidnapped her, what they had done with her. They didn't know which one was involved or if both of them were. However, that day prior to Kayleigh's body being found at 3 a.m., investigators went to the storage unit that belonged to Stephen Beedman's family. and they feared what they would find inside. Sure enough, CCTV footage actually caught him there that Sunday after Kayleigh had disappeared, and he was just sitting in a van outside the storage unit. It never caught him going in, it never caught him doing anything. But investigators got inside this storage unit that belonged to the family, and they didn't find anything. It was completely neat and tidy. That's when they began to search the surrounding area, and in a whole bunch of trash, they found a handbag and a cardigan. These were brought to Kayleigh's mother, who confirmed they belonged to her. At this point, Stephen was still being interrogated to see if they could get more clues out of him, and that's when he would slip up. He then told investigators why his face was injured like that, and that he fell while working outdoors. And when they asked him where he worked, he disclosed a location. And they immediately went to this location, and they found bloodied clothes and a trash bag in a bonfire pit that had yet to be lit. They found it, they took it in to be tested, and the blood matched Kayleigh Haywood. This made them believe that Kayleigh had been murdered. But just the next day, she would be found. This wasn't actually just by a stroke of luck, though. After days of interrogation, Stephen finally admitted what he had done. You see, he gave the location of her body. This was nearby where he worked as a landscaper, and he didn't really know exactly where he dumped her. He said it was dark out, but this was the general location. Investigators actually searched all day and couldn't find her at first, and a few went back to search throughout the night because they wanted to find her and bring her home. Around 10 p.m. is when she would be found naked except for one sock, and she was in a very strange position, like she had been thrown there with her body like twisted. She had injuries covering her head and her hands as, defense wounds, and her body then had to be carried across the field. When they found her and saw that she had in fact been murdered, Stephen Beedman was charged with sexual assault and murder, and Luke Harlow was charged with grooming and 2 counts of having sexual activity with a child. Stephen then confessed that he and Luke had been with a drunk Kayleigh inside of Luke's apartment that Saturday night, sexually assaulting her up until 3 a.m. when she escaped. She was barefoot, she was without pants, and she was running through the neighborhood screaming for help. This is when all the neighbors, of course, heard the screaming and didn't do anything. But Stephen eventually caught up to her and tackled her to the ground, wrestling with her before pulling her up and yanking her away. He then took her to a secluded farm area where he sexually assaulted her and killed her by beating her to death with a brick. But both Stephen and Luke denied falsely imprisoning Kayleigh for those 6 hours between when Stephen came over and before she escaped. But it seems to me that if she had to escape barefoot without pants, she had been held against her will. But investigators began to get really worried because Stephen appeared to know exactly what he was doing with the murder, with the sexual assaults, with the cover-up and the interrogation, being able to lie. He just seemed like he had done it before. So they decided to search his apartment, and they searched his computer to find that he'd searched Lime Pit only hours after he had dumped Kayleigh's body. He also simply watched a TV show after that, like it didn't faze him. And prior to him being arrested, he had looked at both Kayleigh and Luke's Facebook profiles. He also often searched for horrific online images of children. They were graphic and violent. They believed that Stephen had decided to make it a reality when he saw Kayleigh drunk that night. The trial began in April of 2016, and it was brought up in court that Kayleigh had actually attempted to reach out for help that night before she was murdered. A friend took the stand, and her friend was named Katie, and she said, "At about 3:15 p.m. on November 13th, Kayleigh messaged me and said she couldn't come over because she was staying with her auntie that weekend. I woke up at around 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. the next day, and I had a message from Kayleigh sent at 9:30 p.m. the night before, which said help. I asked her straight away, 'What do you mean?' She texted back straight away, 'I meant hello.' Her messages were unusual that weekend and didn't sound like her. Now, nobody knows whether she was really asking for help or whether she meant to say hello. But it was also found that Kayleigh wasn't the only underage girl that Luke was talking to. His Facebook showed that there were multiple underage girls that he was messaging even as young as 13 years old as a 26, 27-year-old man. There was a girl prior to Kayleigh whom he messaged, "Would you come and stay for the weekend or something? I would come and meet you somewhere, and that means I'm going to keep you forever. I'm crying and I miss you. I need them kisses off you to cheer me up. Kisses and maybe more." To another girl, he said, "I want to take advantage of you, get you drunk." At Christmas 2014, he had said to her, "Can I kidnap you for Christmas? I mean it. I would keep you here all Christmas. I wish I could kidnap you for Christmas, but I would probably be arrested and sent to prison. If I kidnap you, I'm keeping you." It even got worse from here. And to the youngest girl, he said, "Having sex with drunk, unconscious girls is my favorite. I will pay for you to get here, but then you will have to stay here forever as my slave. A naked slave." Luke had been doing this to many, many girls. And thankfully they survived. But they also shouldn't have had to deal with a predator trying to lure them in. Now, for much of this trial, Stephen actually refused to be present. You see, he said he was extremely emotional and distraught seeing all this evidence, but this was a complete 180 to how he acted during interrogation, when he was cool, calm, collected, and methodical, emotionless, and didn't care what he had done. It was believed that this was a show to make him appear more innocent. But Luke, on the other hand, took the stand himself, even though that is oftentimes really looked down upon for the person being tried to actually take the stand, but he did. And this is when he would play the victim role himself. You see, he was talking about how he was used by Stephen and how he was put in this position. Yet Kayleigh was the one murdered and he didn't even bring her up. Luke was then given 12 years. And he stood with his arms crossed, glaring at the jury while his sister told him that they would fight it. Stephen, on the other hand, was sentenced to life with a minimum of 35 years. The Leicestershire Police Department decided that this wasn't enough, and the family agreed. That is when they created a film called Kayleigh's Love Story. Now, this is shown to students all around the world to warn them about online predators and the dangers of talking to people online that you don't know. And her story, as tragic as it is, has helped hundreds of children come forward with noticing this behavior by watching this film and realizing that a predator has been talking to them and going to police or adults with this information, which is crucial before something happens to them. I will have it linked down below because, of course, with copyright, I'm not sure I can show it, but I really recommend you showing it to anyone in your life that you think could use it, your children, kids you know, even adults, teenagers, adults. I think any of us can be put in positions where we don't think the clearest and we are manipulated. Because this isn't just something that Luke and Stephen did. People everywhere are capable of these horrors, and in fact, it was found that Luke wasn't the only one messaging Kayleigh. You see, it was found that days before Kayleigh went to Luke's home and was murdered, a boy named Bruce Cordwell had messaged her as well. He was 20 years old talking to a 15-year-old. He knew her age, and he messaged her for sex. He was sending her horrific images. When it was found that Bruce had done this, he was charged with grooming her, but he denied it. However, then after that, he did plead guilty. He had nothing to do with her murder and with Luke or Stephen, but it was very possible that in another scenario, if she would have talked to him first, that he could have been the one to attack her, harm her, or kill her. Bruce had also been talking to many underage girls, and he would send them pictures of explicit things. He also went by Sexy B on Facebook, and he wrote a status after Kayleigh was found murdered, saying, "WTF the F, Kayleigh J. Louise X, RIP, Heaven has got another angel. Luke Harlow, you little scumbag, you need effing shooting. You and your scummy mate. She was 15 years old, you rats. My thoughts are with her and her family. Rest in peace, Kayleigh. You will be missed. Seems like a caring guy, right? Yeah. Exactly what he wanted you to think. Because he called Luke and Steven scumbags, even though he was doing the exact same thing to Kayleigh before she was murdered. That's the problem. These predators hide behind these different faces, these different masks, and that's much easier to do behind a screen. Because when you're adding people as friends or people are following you online, it doesn't appear that they're strangers anymore. You seem to know them. You can see their profile. It's not that big of a deal to talk to them, right? Wrong. This wasn't the fault of Kayleigh's for not seeing the wrongdoings of Luke. This was a teenager who fell for a predator who was saying all the right things. This is why you have to be careful who you trust, because bad people often don't have empathy, and they often don't mean what they say. Or if they do mean it, it'll be the things that you try to push off as a joke because they're so inappropriate, and so they'll laugh it off too. But that's the one thing they really meant. My advice to all of you is to always, no matter your age, no matter if you were a teenager, if you were an adult, to always get a second opinion from someone that you trust, that has a good head on their shoulders, of how this person is treating you, of how any person that you're involved with, whether it's a friend, whether it's a relationship, whether it's someone you've met online, whatever the case, make sure you're getting a second opinion. I even still do this when I'm online dating, because these people are so good at manipulation and grooming with nice words and a false reality, and you get this picture of what it could be with them because they want you to have that picture so you don't see who they really are, how they really act, until it's too late to get out. So I always recommend that sometimes we can be blinded by that, but other people on the outside can see more sometimes than we can. And so it's always good to get a second opinion when you're talking to somebody. If they see this person manipulating you, if they think something they said was wrong and raises a red flag, listen to them. Because a lot of the times we can be wearing our rose-colored glasses when we see someone that we like, we think is attractive, they're treating us right, and somebody else is telling us they're not treating you right. You're not seeing half the things that they're saying to you. You're not reading between the lines. And that's what you need to listen to, no matter how amazing they seem. I just hope that this is a cautionary tale for all of you. And I hope that after this, you are more cautious when you're online, when you are talking to anybody, because you just don't know their intentions, unfortunately. There are far too many bad people in this world. Now, if you want to hear more stories about online dating gone wrong and the different things that can happen even as an adult, I really recommend the Deadly Date series on Magellan TV, because it's not just something that happens to kids. It can happen to adults too. And there, like I said, there's so many other documentaries if you want to break from true crime, if you need, breath of fresh air. There's, so many different types of things you can learn about on there. So I really recommend it. It will be linked down below. And if you enjoy my videos, I really, really, really appreciate it if you share them on your social media and, tag me in it. I always like to see when you guys share it, or, just give this a thumbs up, leaving a nice comment down below. It really means the world to me that you guys want to support me and want to see this family grow. I love each and every one of you, and don't ever forget to speak up. Your voice is powerful enough, and I love you to absolute pieces. Okay, bye.